Right. Hello. Again. This is the third part in the series of me looking at the weapon mastery system that's coming with SOTO and what builds it might enable or support. I've already done videos on the light and the medium classes, so today we're looking at the heavy ones. Disclaimers still apply, and yes, I do have to repeat this every time, but let's get through them fast. I'm only looking at this from a PvE perspective because I'm a bad source of information for the competitive modes, and those really need to be examined separately. I'm also focusing on the group content side of things, so raids, strikes, fractals, that type of thing. If you find something interesting for open world, there is nothing stopping you from trying it, so go for it. I just don't want to have to repeat that every single time. Anyway, I find it interesting that I've probably seen the most interest in this whole system in regard to the heavy classes over the other two, just in the community in general. Though, that's not coming from an exactly scientific sample size. But I won't lie, I think the heavies are probably the least interesting for this. Now, maybe that's my bias talking because I'm not the biggest fan of the heavy classes, but I really think they're just kind of suffering from success here. Guardian and Warrior just have a lot of good weapons in the core set already that are heavily used, so there's not really any holes that desperately need fixing. Except for Revenant. Revenant's a different story and we'll get to that, but let's start in order and look at Guardian. Starting off with Longbow, Longbow is a good weapon and it is the only long-ranged weapon for Guardian, assuming we don't count staff, but that is exclusively a support weapon, so It is of course an option for Willbender. It might even be the highest DPS option, though of course Willbender can't benefit from the range by virtue of how its F skills work. Quick tangent, but I find it really frustrating just how similar Dragon Hunter and Willbender play. I really wish they were more distinct, and the thing that was setting them apart right now was mostly Longbow and always getting forced into melee by the Willbender F1. Now that Longbow is no longer exclusive and might even be the best option on both, yeah, I really wish they would take another look at either one of these specs just to make them more distinct from one another. But since neither of them are grossly underperforming, I doubt we'll see that. Anyway, in regards to Firebrand, so Power Firebrand, or Power Quickness Firebrand specifically, used to be a thing, but that was mostly just because it was a niche fractal build, because that was a time where Quickness Firebrand was extremely relevant for fractals, but Connie was quite bad there, so that was kind of the stitched together version of Firebrand that saw play there. But by now, between changes to fractals themselves and the changes to the Firebrand traits and how that works, yeah, there's just not really any reason to run that anymore. Though I do find this particularly interesting for open world because, again, Longbow is your only long-ranged option, so, Axe. Axe is a really good weapon just independently, though it does have absolutely no synergy with Dragon Hunter, which is a spec with no interest in Condi or support, though it is nice for Willbender. Condi Willbender has always been in a bit of a weird place, but this is probably a pretty direct buff for it. Also, in regards to the Alacrity version, it does the exact same amount of fury as the sword would, but I think, and take this with a grain of salt, the sword was already run on the Condi Alac version anyway, because often for Condi Guardian it matters more how many hits you can get in rather than the Condi damage on the weapons. But regardless of that, Axe is a really good Condi weapon, probably going to see play on Condi Willbender, and is going to make that a little more consistent, which is nice. Offhand Sword! Yeah, this is possibly one of the most underwhelming elite spec weapons ever. It's one of the reasons I really can't warm up to Willbender. And even Willbender itself does not run Offhand Sword, it's just not good enough. Which, by extension, is probably going to make it irrelevant on the rest of Guardian as well. It's fun for going wee in open world, and again, that Power Quickness Firebrand open world build that I just talked about probably is going to have a good time with it, but it's not going to have any meta relevance anywhere unless they make major changes to it. Revenant! Now, I'm gonna have to say it, this is probably the best thing to ever happen to Revenant just in general. Seriously, if you don't count underwater weapons, Core Rev has one more weapon than Core Ellie. And Core Ellie was designed to have a very low count of weapons because it gets 4 times the amount of weapon skills. It is just stupid. So Revenant is going to massively appreciate the increase in just usable weapons. Starting with Shield, I vaguely remember Rev Shield being kind of useless, but what I was actually remembering was pretty much Release Herald, which is essentially the last time I had touched Revenant Shield. It's actually a totally fine weapon. The 5 is still a little bit awkward and not that great, but the 4 does make it useful for healing builds, and particularly Heal Renegade, though nobody really plays Heal Renegade. That's more an issue with Renegade and how its utility compares to other healing lack options, as well as the current version of Heal Herald, so Shield's not really gonna fix that, but it is another home for Shield. Vindicator can't really use this. There used to be a somewhat memey heal Vindicator build, but yeah, that's, I think, now relegated entirely to World vs. World. And we're not talking about that, so let's move on to Shortbow. Shortbow might be low-key my favorite Revenant weapon, and this is great news for Connie Herald, though I don't expect Connie DPS Herald to actually see any play, but there is a quickness version, and that is going to massively appreciate getting Shortbow. Vindicator, again, is not going to appreciate this. They are exclusively a power spec. They're kind of, I think, used to be a weird hybrid Renegade build, and I think that might have run Shortbow, but that was very short-lived and not particularly good, so yeah. Greatsword! Holy shit! Revenant is allowed to have another good power weapon besides swords? Oh my god! No, seriously, can we please retune some of the animations for Hammer and buff the damage of the damn thing? It's been basically unusable in PvE since release. Greatsword is an auto-include in any power DPS version of both Herald and Renegade, which are both underperforming to varying degrees at the moment. So they're going to be quite happy about that, and it's also going to go a long way to make those builds far less boring to play, which might finally make me take them seriously. I would say it's probably less useful on the boon DPS versions of these builds, just because Staff and its CC is so incredibly powerful and valuable that, except in fights where there is literally no break bar, you're probably still going to be running Staff more often than not. But yeah, for the pure DPS versions, this is amazing news. Warrior! Torch is a short one because it's basically useless on anything that isn't Berserker. Neither Spellbreaker nor Bladesworn have any sort of Condi synergy, and any weird janky Condi build that you could try to force on either of them is just better off being run on Berserker, so Torch has no other home. Daggers are a bit complicated. They're a slight bit meh. They're really cool, but they're just not that special, and are gonna have a real hard time competing with axes and Greatsword. Spellbreaker can use them very well, because for one, Dagger main hand is a power main hand weapon that has CC on it, which synergizes with Attacker's Insight. There's also the trait that just straight up makes you do 10% extra damage if you have a main hand dagger. Without those synergies, I don't think we're gonna see it elsewhere. It might be a neat utility swap for Berserker over Greatsword if you desperately need the boon strip and have no other sources for it, but I doubt it could see any meta-relevant play. There was an Axe Dagger, Dagger Axe set that was played on Spellbreaker a long time ago. In theory, Berserker could run that, but the Dagger burst is just not going to be good enough, and without that 10% damage increase from the Spellbreaker traits, yeah, it's just not competing with Greatsword at all. I am sorry. Similarly, it's not worth using on Bladesworn because there's no ammo skills on either of them, and Bladesworn really needs those for the synergy, particularly with Pistol ticking up the Fiercest Fire count very quickly, so it's just kind of not worth using on that one either. Very disappointing, but those are just the facts. And Offhand Pistol is in a very similar boat. It's a very cute toy, but it's probably not very good compared to Offhand Axe or just running Greatsword, even potentially over Offhand Dagger on the other specs due to the lack of the ammo synergy. You don't even have a matching ranged main hand weapon that you could take advantage of for open world, so Pistol being a ranged weapon doesn't do anything for you either. I personally really like the feel of Offhand Pistol, but it's kind of another quite underwhelming weapon. Admittedly, this one's kind of understandable because the real new weapon that Bladesworn got was the Gunsaber, not Pistol. Pistol is just kind of an add-on with synergy. So yeah, that was kind of a short one. because most of these are fairly cut and dry. The heavy weapons just have very clear-cut roles and a lot of very strong competition, which kind of gives them fewer options as to how they will interact with the weapon mastery system. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you haven't yet, you can go watch the other 2 videos to see me talk about the other classes as well. And if you did, or just in general found this series interesting, informative, or whatever, you know, maybe do the YouTube thing, subscribing, liking it. It does actually get the video out to more people, which is cool. I don't really know what I'm covering next. I was kind of thinking about doing a first impressions of the core relics that everybody's getting in that box on SOTO release. So if that's something you could be interested in, let me know. But till then, see you on the other side of whatever weird portal is gonna get us into the Wizard's Tower. Goodbye!